those oil reserves. Thomas, that would potentially be the biggest release in their history. What kind of difference could that make?
Well, I essentially agree with what Ian has said. It's basically to reassure the markets. Look, Fatih Birol made it very clear last Friday, and also Chris Wright, the Secretary of Energy in the United States, there's plenty of oil in the market. And I have to say, I could explain, there's so much extra oil. There was 1.4 about billion barrels floating on the water, which is a huge amount. So there's no real need to put oil in the market. This was the optimal time if somebody wanted to attack Iran. But I think what happened is panic when the market opened, it spiked. And there's been some reassurance from the White House. The president isn't so good at sticking on cue, but Chris Wright and others have made pretty clear that there's plenty of oil available. And the price every morning on Tuesday and Wednesday morning, the price was coming down. And I think by just announcing that the IEA might put this oil back on the market, it reassures everybody.
So, Chris, do you think that So, Thomas, this the Straits of Hormuz is obviously a pinch point, a flashpoint in this conflict at this stage. But what about the reason for it in the first place? Is some of the reason for this conflict that the United States actually wants to control the oil that Iran has?
I'm going to tell you about that, but let me just object a little bit to what Chris was saying there. 20 million barrels comes out of the Gulf. However, the Saudis can pump about let's say 6 million barrels through their pipeline that avoids it. The UAE about 1.5, and the Americans are letting the Iranians keep sending their oil out. Why not? So that cuts it down to about 11 million barrels a day. The strategic reserves are about 1.8 when you consider commercial stocks, 2 billion barrels. That's something like 160 days worth of oil. If you need to make up 11. Now you have to get it around the right place. There's no fundamental problem. But that's another issue. Now, why the United States is doing this exactly, I have to say, I just put it this way. Because of the war in Ukraine, the United States, in their energy dominance strategy under Trump, the United States is by far the biggest producer of oil and gas in the world. He wants to use it. He started to use it against Russia, preparing to take Russian barrels offline systematically. But he stopped. Although there's plenty of oil in the market to replace Russia right now, if they do this, they wanted to get Venezuela online because longer term that can easily replace Russia. And I think they wanted to solve the problem with Iran, various things, their missile program especially. But 5.4 million barrels a day of Chinese oil comes out of the Gulf, okay? And once the United States controls Hormuz, they'll be the arbiter of whether China and how China receives that. And if they make a deal with Iran and develop their oil sector, they will have America and its allies will have 60% of the world's production under essentially under Washington's hegemony. And that's considerable power over China. And in the end, I think that's what Trump's interest is here.
And that's all because of these high energy prices.
Well, Thomas, I want to come to you because the idea of an international market throws up the question of Russia, which you mentioned. Russia has said that it's ready to work again with European customers to put its oil back into the market. And the Trump administration has said that it may reduce oil sanctions on countries, including Russia. How might that shake things up?
Look, essentially, the United States and Ukraine together had a joint campaign since about last April. There's the drone strikes, which are coordinated by the American intelligence and logistics. We're hitting refineries, forcing the Russians to export more oil. However, they've only got three westward-facing ports that can really get much of this out. The Ukrainians were hitting the biggest one. So they have a problem. The oil starts to get backed up, and the ports are at 100%. And then what happened is Trump cut off India, and they only had China left. In the last 2 or 3 months, the Russians put 50% more oil on the water, essentially oil that has no place to go. And it was almost at the point where they're going to have to turn off fields in West Siberia in winter, and you'll probably never get them back online. In winter, it would be a mess. They're very old fields. This is something hanging over Putin. Now he's getting a reprieve because Trump wants to do something with Iran and he's letting him sell oil. So it's kind of counterproductive. He'll sell oil to India, take care of India, while Trump finishes with Iran. When he's done with Iran, he'll turn back to Russia and finish the project with Russia. And I would just say very quickly, the other thing, the interest in the Straits of Hormuz, you have to take Xi Jinping serious. And I think Biden and Trump both took him seriously when he said, be prepared by 2027 to take back Taiwan. So they take him seriously. If there is a war, we know that the American Navy would cut off the oil to China. China's been putting 1 million barrels a day underground for oil over a year. On the other hand, China could have Iran close the Straits of Hormuz, and all our allies in the Pacific who get their oil from there, Japan, Korea, so forth, would be in trouble. And the Americans would have to divert a couple aircraft carriers during a war to reopen it. So I think if that's how the Americans are thinking, they'll do whatever it takes to reopen and have complete control of Hormuz now. It's the kind of thing great powers do when they think a major conflict might be coming.
So the Straits of... Well, Thomas, I want to come to you on that because you've worked in Washington, haven't you? And as Ian says, this won't play well for President Trump. Also, this could potentially be a squeeze on fertilizer, which also comes through the Strait of Hormuz. Not good for farmers, possible Trump voters.
No, I agree. Ian's making some good points. This can have a lot of effects if it goes on. And war, the other side gets a vote in a war. This is something the Americans have gamed out for 40 years. And I think Trump is portraying it a little bit differently than it was before. If you go back to Dick Cheney, you go back to, those years, they talked about if Iran didn't behave, tried to develop a nuclear weapon, or now this rocketry, which in a sense is as effective, that they would bomb them back to the Stone Age. That's what he used to say. And the campaign would essentially be, B-52s bombing and bombing and bombing. Now, Trump says, I want to make a deal. But he started the same program. This program is, if you listen to any of the ex-admirals for the area, General Petraeus, Pete Hegseth, even the Secretary of War, or John Bolton, this is a campaign that's going to go on for weeks. The Iranians could, quote, surrender, make a deal, but if they don't, it'll go on. And all those people I mentioned, I've heard them say once or twice, will it go on? Well, the B-2 bombers and the B-52s have just begun to arrive. So it's that they would try to completely devastate the industrial base, the basis for Iran to make missiles and to control the Straits of Hormuz. And as I said earlier, my impression is they feel this is necessary because of the challenge China might pose. They want to secure this area and also secure control over half of China's oil. It's not a pretty picture, but it's real politics. Things like this happened before World War II also.
So, and Thomas, we should perhaps touch on the fact that the particular kind of oil produced in Iran is, let's call it a premium product, if you like. It's very adaptable, isn't it? And actually not all countries make that kind of oil.
No, you're right. I think that the American intention is if they make a deal or somehow get control of Iran in the way, or there's a revolution in the way that they have in Venezuela, they will be able to develop Iran's oil much more rapidly. You can produce the oil there for $10, $15, $20 a barrel, and it's a bit more expensive in Venezuela, a bit more high-tech things involved. Let me just point out, along the lines of what Chris is saying, I sympathize. It'd be great if we could do this. In the world today, almost every single country, with a couple exceptions, between 90 and 93% of everything that moves in the country is fueled by 60% of the world's oil. The rest goes to other things. China has had a very elaborate energy security program. Let me just say they learned from Japan in World War II when FDR cut off the oil and that kind of thing. And they've had a 25 or more year project to, first of all, get its companies out there, acquire oil, to try and avoid the Straits of Malacca by making pipelines around to other ports and bringing pipelines in from, getting oil from Russia that's harder to block some. They've got all this, and by developing electric cars very aggressively. So they're down below 90%. but they're abjectly dependent on oil. If there's a conflict, if they try to take Taiwan or some other test, their oil will be cut off. And so I'm sure Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi will be talking about that in about a month.
So as this, okay, gentlemen, it was great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining this conversation here on Roundtable. Chris Caldwell from United Renewables, Thomas O'Donnell, energy and geopolitics strategist, financial journalist Ian King, and Professor Stephen Chan from SOAS, University of London.